Snakebite is OP. I'm not clickbaiting. I actually think this card is amazing. And I've been thinking about it for 2 days straight, and I finally understand why. I know there's been a lot of discussion on the Reddit. I'm a little late to the party here, but I think it still deserves more love than I was able to see online. And especially with the Slay the Spire devs doing that one interview maybe a week ago from this video's release date. I can link it below. It was mentioned that the devs really like this card, and they think it has a place, and I understand why now. Give me a chance to make my case, and hear me out here. So, here's a list of all the strongest damage cards that exist for Silent in the early game. And I want to talk about Act 1 because I don't think Snakebite is a card you want to ever take beyond Act 1. There's a lot better scaling on the character between powers and between like her discard synergies. And in reality, you're never going to want to take a 2-cost card in the late game when each of your draws matter more and more, and the synergies for Snakebite are very loose. They don't scale as well, but they are powerful in that they're flexible. We'll go into that later, but for now, here's a bit of a damage comparison. I would say the best example is Pinpoint or Predator, just on the surface. Ricochet is probably the next strongest in the common slot, but it does require Sly for it to actually be useful. And Precise Cut is close, as well as Deadly Poison. Precise Cut does do a big flat damage at the start, but it realistically maxes on like 11 if it's not turn 1. And Deadly Poison, we'll get into more, but it is the closest long-term comparison. Poison Stab is also good, but a lot of times with Silent, you don't really have a problem of winning the fight early. You have a lot of upfront damage cards sometimes, like really rare scenarios. Maybe you had a lot of strength. I had a run where I had like 7 strength in the fight on average, but that's not common. Like, that's not gonna happen every fight. I think it's a lot more consistent to go for overtime damage in the early game, just because you don't know how long the fight's gonna go, but you can assume it's gonna go at least 4 to 5 turns on these elites and such. So that's where I did a bit of a graph here, determining how strong Snakebite is. Of course, it matches with Deadly Poison Plus, but we're assuming no upgrades for now. And over the course of 4 turns, it's doing 22 damage for 2 mana. And it's kind of hard to beat that, for the most part. And because you know the fights usually are going to go longer unless you have like a super run, it's the most consistent card, especially in the common slot. The only like card comparable is Acrobatics, but Acrobatics, you require Sly Synergy, which you don't have early every time, and it's kind of a scaling card. Like early game, this is something that can make a big difference. And Snakebite Plus, it goes from like this 22 damage over 4 turns to 34 damage over 4 turns. It is just insane because Deadly Poison Plus requires the extra draw because you're drawing 2 Deadly Poisons to make up for 1 Snakebite, effectively, or 1.5 Deadly Poisons really, and you're getting 22 damage for 1 as opposed to 34 damage for 2 on the upgraded slot. And unupgraded, it's 14 compared to 22, which isn't a big deal overall. Not to say that Deadly Poison is a bad card, but as the highest damage common in comparison, it shows that Snakebite is actually not far behind the curve. So the retain keyword gives you a ton of synergies. We'll go into specific cards right after this, but just off the bat, you're basically getting an extra draw every turn that you don't use the Snakebite. So even in a fight where it's really bad, like the enemy has Artifact, so you have to wait for your neutralize, you effectively draw an extra card because it's 2 cost, right? Like, drawing an ultimate strike is better than a normal strike because it's effectively 2 strikes, right? Even if it costed 2 energy, it'd be better, just because it saves you the draw. It's flexible because of the retain. It increases your hand size, which helps a lot. There's a lot of synergy, and we'll go into specific ones later. but I would say it's probably one of the most open-ended cards to take in the early game that doesn't make you feel terrible about having it later. It's also one of the highest damage commons, as we mentioned before, so it kind of covers a lot of your weaknesses as Silent in Act 1. For more specific synergy here, Calculated Gamble, it'll draw you the extra card if you just return it for a turn. Bullet Time is a card that's actually really hard to use on Silent, but if you end up like transforming into it, or I've gotten at the start of the run with the Transform 2, I've somehow found it, and I realize I have a lot of heavy cards and an Acrobatics, so when you upgrade the Bullet Time, it costs 2, you can Acrobatics into Bullet Time, and you can guarantee that the retained Snakebite is always free. And because it has Retain, you're just waiting for the perfect turn. Pounce is kind of the same deal. Impatience is good because it's not affected by Snakebite being a skill. Production, it upgrades to have no exhaust, but you don't have a lot of ways to spend the energy unless you have the perfect draws. You don't need the perfect draws because you have Retain. Scrawl, what Scrawl says is after you draw your hand, you're going to use the best cards from the hand, right? Except you will also retain the Snakebite. Anticipate, now you're turning a draw 4 into a draw 5 for most of the turns, so you have more chances to use the dexterity you gain. And the reason the hunt is up here is because you have a reasonable amount of poison to work with. You can actually time the hunt very consistently, or stall for it because you're getting the extra draws from the retain. I would say my favorite synergy with this card is probably Cloak Clasp and Art of War. Cloak Clasp, you're basically getting an extra block every turn. It's the only retain card besides Well-Laid Plans in the entire like Silent collection. Except you don't have to pay for the Well-Laid Plans tax of the 1 energy and 1 card draw. It shrinks your deck for Pendulum. The fact it's 2 cost gives you the 4 block from the helmet and allows you to hit your pocket watch more consistently. And it's better to hit a 2 cost card with the hand, the mummy hand, than anything else. And it's not consistent in that case, but you're happy to have it. And my favorite part about this retain card is that when you're fighting a lot of the enemies in Slay the Spire 2, they're like turns where you need damage, and then you draw all blocks and you hate your life. It's happened to me multiple times. I think I'm 100 runs deep, maybe 50 runs. I'm not the best player. I would say I'm like a mid-level player. I beat Ascension and maybe like 10 to 20% win rate on all characters. But I have seen multiple times on these buff turns or debuff turns that these guys are taking, I just don't have damage. Which would have been really nice to either plan around or have ready my Snakebite. Because I can guarantee that I have a damage card on that turn, assuming my draw RNG is bad. Like, it's a perfect fail-safe for a lot of these turns, which leads to long-term consistency over the course of Act 1. So that's why Snakebite's the GOAT. Thank you for watching. I just really love this card. Please consider it. It's not the best in every scenario, but for what it does, it is amazing. Have a good one.